Hi everyone, it's Pastor Kirk. The information in this series about the Bible verses misused against the lgbtqia plus community is free in the study resources for my personal profile page. Some people need a short video instead. Let's look at the Genesis 19 story, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This chapter is often cited as evidence against lgbtqia plus relationships, but it's important to understand the context. Sodom's sin was not about consensual, loving relationships, but rather about the extreme inhospitality and violence they showed to strangers. It violated the sacred tradition of hospitality, and it wasn't an indictment of same-sex love. Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13 are often cited as a condemnation of homosexuality. However, we must consider the cultural and historical context. In Judaism, these verses are seen as part of the broader Levitical law, which contains numerous commandments given to the ancient Israelites. It's important to note that Judaism, like Christianity, has evolved over time. These Levitical passages aren't applicable to modern understandings of same-sex relationships. In the larger context of the passages, they're about cultic practices rather than about consensual and loving same-sex relationships. Romans 1:26 and 27 is part of Paul's letter, and it's often cited as evidence against LGBTQIA plus relationships. However, we must read it in context. Paul was addressing specific issues in the Roman world, including idolatry and promiscuity. He wasn't condemning loving, committed LGBTQIA plus relationships as we understand them today. 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 10 and 1 Timothy 1:10 are some more passages often misinterpreted. It's important to note that the word homosexual wasn't used in the original Greek text. The passages address exploitative relationships, not loving ones. The context of the passages is a vice list, and it's not related to consensual, loving, same-sex relationships. Jude chapter 6 and 7 refer back to the story of Sodom. Like Genesis, this passage is about the sin of Sodom, but not about homosexuality. The only reason the book of Jude is misused against the LGBTQIA plus community is that there is a presupposition that Sodom and Gomorrah was specifically a prohibition against same-sex relationships. It wasn't. Sodom's sin was rooted in arrogance, disregard for the poor, and a failure to extend hospitality to strangers. It was a sin of inhospitality, not sexuality. Deuteronomy 22:5 is often cited as an anti-transgender passage. It isn't at all. The context has to do with war and people involved with the fighting in a war. It denounces trying to hide one's true identity to avoid serving in a military capacity. It has nothing to do with people who are transgender. It also has nothing to do with drag shows. Instead of misusing scripture passages to fit an anti-LGBTQIA plus narrative, study the scriptures honestly. In Matthew 19:4, Jesus quotes the passage from Genesis 2 about God creating humanity as male and female. First part, the Bible's use of the binary male and female uses a literary device called merism, where the binary opposite terms are used to describe an entire spectrum in between. Think day and night, there's dusk and dawn, and land and sea, there's marshes, as well as God being Alpha and Omega, and everything in between. Second part, a short while later in Matthew 19 and verse 12, Jesus affirms eunuchs, who nowadays would identify as members of the LGBTQIA plus community. Jesus was aware of gender variance, and he did not condemn it. Let's follow Jesus in living our love for one another.